Get ready for a mysterious and chilling story. In the autumn of 1888, a shadow stalked the foggy and narrow streets of London's East End. This shadow etched its name in history, not only for its horrific murders, but also for the fact that it would never be found. Its name was Jack the Ripper. It was the autumn of 1888. A shadow stalked the foggy, narrow, and impoverished streets of London's East End. These neighborhoods were places where misery and despair ran rampant. Life was already difficult for those who lived there, but that autumn, a wind of terror began to blow. It all started when the lifeless body of a woman named Marian Nichols was found in Whitechapel on the morning of August 31st. Her throat had been cut and her body savagely mutilated. This wasn't just a terrible murder, this was the beginning of something. Just 1 week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman was found murdered in a similar fashion in the same area. Her throat had also been cut, and her internal organs had been removed. It was now clear that these murders were no coincidence. London was on the trail of a killer. Fear turned into whispers on the streets. Newspapers carried every murder on their front pages, and the public was in a panic, wondering who the killer was. But the most terrifying night had not yet come. September 30th went down in history as the double event night. Just 1 hour apart, two women, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, were killed. This showed how bold and merciless the killer was. Eddowes' murder was particularly savage. Her face and body had been left unrecognizable, and one of her kidneys and her uterus had been removed. During those days, letters signed as Jack the Ripper began arriving at a newspaper, raising the terror to a new level. It was as if the killer was mocking the police and the public. From that day on, that unknown killer became known as Jack the Ripper. It was unknown if the letters were real or a hoax, but the name stuck. The last victim was Mary Jane Kelly, murdered on November 9th. The murder was even more gruesome than the others. The woman had been torn to pieces in her room. It was a crime that seemed to have been committed by a monster. And then, everything stopped. The murders suddenly ended. Jack the Ripper vanished without a trace. He had left no clues, disappearing into the darkness with his secret. For years, countless theories about the killer's identity were put forward. Some claimed he was a surgeon, others a nobleman, but no definitive evidence was ever found. The story of Jack the Ripper is not just a series of murders, but also a legend that reflects the dark side of London during that period. Even today, there are those who try to solve who that shadow was in those foggy streets. But his secret is still hidden in those gloomy autumn nights. A cold February night. Stockholm's busy streets were overflowing with people leaving the cinema. Everyone was lost in their own world. Laughter, footsteps, city lights. And among that crowd, one of the world's most powerful figures walked unprotected, side by side only with his wife. Imagine a prime minister, one who never built walls between himself and his people, who lived like an ordinary citizen. That man was Olof Palme. But that very night, on February 28, 1986, at exactly 11:21 p.m., Olof Palme's life, Sweden's image of peace, and an entire nation's sense of security were shattered by a single bullet. That evening, Palme had decided to go to the cinema with his wife Lisbeth. The film, Bröderna Mozart, the Mozart brothers. He had chosen not to bring bodyguards, because he was a leader who loved being among his people, who valued closeness and sincerity. When the film ended, the night was cold but the street was alive. The couple strolled down Sveavägen. They had blended into the crowd. Nobody even noticed that the Prime Minister was among them, until a shadow approached from behind. Suddenly, 2 gunshots. Palme collapsed to the ground. Lisbeth was wounded. Screams erupted around them. Panic filled the street. No one understood what was happening, and the assassin vanished into the darkness. Olof Palme was not only Sweden's leader, but also a politician closely watched by the entire world. He was the harshest European critic of the Vietnam War. He was one of the strongest voices against apartheid in South Africa. He kept his distance from the Soviet Union as well, challenging both superpowers. And so, Palme's list of enemies was long. From the CIA to the KGB, from South African intelligence to international arms dealers, anyone could have had a motive. In the immediate aftermath, Swedish police launched one of the largest investigations in history. Tens of thousands of people were questioned. Hundreds of tips came in, yet no solid evidence was ever found. Some theories claimed Palme's death was part of an international conspiracy. Others suggested that Kurdish organizations were involved. and some researchers believed it was the act of a lone gunman. Years later, a man named Stig Engstrom, a graphic designer, was declared the prime suspect. But before the case could move forward, Engstrom took his own life. And so, the investigation once again ended in uncertainty. Even today, anyone who visits that very spot on Stockholm Street pauses to reflect. The Prime Minister of a nation, gunned down in the middle of what was considered one of the world's safest cities. And decades later, the same haunting questions remain unanswered. Who pulled the trigger? Why was Olof Palme killed? And above all, why has this case never truly been solved? The unknowns have only deepened the mystery. Palme's assassination was not merely the death of a leader. It became known as the night Sweden lost its innocence. Perhaps the truth still lies hidden in classified documents somewhere. Perhaps the killer walked the streets of Stockholm for years, an ordinary face among the crowd. But the only thing we know for certain is this. The murder of Olof Palme remains one of the most striking unsolved assassinations of the modern era. I must warn you, the story I am about to tell is a real and disturbing reflection of a family's nightmare. The story of JonBenet Ramsey is etched in memory as an unresolved enigma, filled with suspense and tragedy for over 2 decades. It was Christmas morning, 1996. A day of peace and joy for everyone turned into an endless nightmare for the Ramsey family in Boulder, Colorado. The visitor who knocked on the door was not a mail carrier, but a deadly silence. What the mother, Patsy Ramsey, found when she came down the stairs was enough to tear her heart out. A 3-page, shaky handwritten ransom note for $118,000. The note stated that her 6-year-old daughter, child beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey, had been kidnapped. The warning at the end of the note was chilling. If you contact the police, your daughter will die. So who was JonBenet? She was just a 6-year-old, a vibrant child with blonde hair and blue eyes who looked like a character from a fairy tale. She was the shining face of the American dream, the queen of child beauty pageants held all across the country. Stepping onto the stage under bright lights, with a made-up face and glittery clothes, this little girl captivated everyone with her innocence and energy. But on that Christmas morning, all that sparkle gave way to darkness. Patsy and her husband John Ramsey called the police anyway. And from that moment on, this mysterious story was dragged into the darkest corners of suspense. When the police arrived, everything turned to chaos. Despite the instructions in the ransom note, no security measures had been taken in the house, and evidence was scattered everywhere. There was no word from the kidnapper, and the family was in a state of terror. As the police searched the house, they asked John Ramsey to check his daughter's room one last time. Instead, he found her in the wine cellar in their basement. Her mouth was taped, her hands were tied, there was a rope around her neck, and a blow to her head. The little girl's lifeless body had extinguished all the lights of Christmas. So who had done this? An intruder from the outside, or someone from within the family? The first suspects for the detectives were the family themselves. The paper and pen used for the ransom note were found inside the house. The mother's handwriting was similar to the one in the note. The victim's body was in the family home. All these details pointed the arrows of suspicion toward them. JonBenet's family and her 9-year-old brother, Burke, remained the focus of the media and the public for many years. Countless theories were produced and accusations flew, but no definitive evidence was ever found. As the years passed, the case went cold. DNA tests were conducted, confessions came, later revealed to be false, and new suspects emerged, but none could be definitively proven. The identity of the real killer is still shrouded in a veil of secrecy. The murder of JonBenet Ramsey went down in history as a chilling symbol of the search for justice that began on a Christmas morning and remains unsolved for more than 25 years. The killer of that little girl could still be out there, somewhere, since that Christmas morning. And that thought turns the entire story into a true nightmare. We've covered 3 of the murders in detail. The remaining 2 cases are up to you. Let us know which of the 2 you'd like us to investigate in the comments, or share your own unsolved murder theories with us.